Hey class, this is Michael LeBlanc. I am talking today about what was Wesley talking about when he was talking about the Holy Spirit. Um, in all of our readings, as I'm sure you've seen, when it comes to all three parts of the Trinity, um, I see a lot of work to be done to show that the doctrinal belief in the Trinity, and so there's a lot of work being done to show that the Holy Spirit is co-equal and eternal. A lot of what I'm getting is from our assigned reading in Odin, which I know isn't a direct quote of Wesley, but Odin's doing just a really good job of pulling out um, the most essential things from Wesley, I think. And so, like Odin says, uh, the major points of Wesley's teachings on the Holy Spirit can be summarized in a sermon entitled "A Letter to a Roman Catholic," and I just thought that the sentence did a really good job of explaining the Trinitarian sense of the Holy Spirit, saying, "I believe the infinite and eternal Spirit of God, equal with the Father and Son, to be not only perfectly holy in himself, but the immediate cause of all holiness in us." And so when we first try to understand the Holy Spirit, or understand what John Wesley understands in the Holy Spirit, we have to first understand that the Holy Spirit is God, that the Holy Spirit is a part of the Trinity and is eternal, has all of the sort of ramifications and essentials that John Wesley assigns to all parts of the Trinity. And so, co-creator of the universe, perfecter of our faith, all those things we see in the Holy Spirit. Beyond that, reading some in Campbell, reading that our understanding of prevenient grace has a lot to do with the Holy Spirit, that the Holy Spirit is in the world, being reflected in the good actions of those that have no connection to the church whatsoever, and the Holy Spirit is reflected in that as well. And just like the last bit of that quote that I read, the Spirit works out the work of our justification, and so the Spirit is the immediate cause of all of our holiness. To me, that how I understand that is that God the Father, without dipping too far into modalism, the way that I understand it, the aspects of God is that God the Father created the world to be of a certain sense. Humanity moved that sense, removed the certain aspirations for creation, moved that and did not attain that and did not maintain that. Jesus redeemed humanity, and the Holy Spirit is in the process of redeeming. To me, the Holy Spirit is actually one of the main reasons why I am a United Methodist. I grew up Southern Baptist, so I grew up being taught that the work of the Spirit was in the instant that we were saved, and then after that, any sins or missteps after that were really on me, and for my justification, I needed to work that out through guilt and shame and prayers and frankly works righteousness, and that the Holy Spirit's grace was only good for when you died, and it really had nothing to do with maintaining a life after God's intention for our heart. And so when I've been reading Wesley's view of the Holy Spirit, I have really been struck by how very personal this God is, how very in the mix this God is. This God, the Holy Spirit is the cause of our holiness, but is also working alongside us towards our own justification as we work out our salvation in fear and trembling. This active process really gets drawn back to the Holy Spirit. And so the Holy Spirit is, in essence, exactly why why I'm still a Christian, but also why I'm still or why I've become a United Methodist. And then another thing that I've seen in my readings, the Spirit bears witness to that work and provides assurance. As we've read, this is something that John Wesley was low-key, like, really obsessed with, like having this assurance and knowing that he has indeed been saved. I find fascinating his interaction with Peter Böhler, the Moravian pastor. Böhler talking, or Buhler, I'm not really sure how you pronounce the umlaut. Böhler talking about how the work of the Spirit results in not only assurance of forgiveness, but also a strength against sin, which I find fascinating, that the work of the Spirit helps to make sin less appealing, and then also allows us to feel a sense of absolute assurance in our forgiveness. I'm with Wesley. I haven't necessarily experienced that too much in my life. Maybe the fear of guilt and shame is just a little bit too hardwired into the old noggin for me. But the assurance that I do feel from the Spirit in my own personal life is an assurance that God is still interacting with me. And I think that comes back to my understanding of the Holy Spirit's work through justification. And not to sound like a broken record, but this interaction, this knowing that when the Holy Spirit speaks to me, that it's actually the divine presence of God speaking to me. And when the Holy Spirit works in my life, it's actually the divine, infinite, creating presence of God interacting with me is really kind of inspiring. I know Wesley said a lot more about the Holy Spirit than what I've laid out here, but these are the things that I find most vital to my understanding of the Holy Spirit, and I hope they help you in your readings and understandings as well. Thanks. Hi, I'll be editing this together because I just plumb forgot to do the case study, to mention the case study, and if I'm really honest, I kind of wish that I had just forgotten about it because, man, this is such a hard case study. Church people can be pretty horrendous. I feel so bad for Larry that his church clearly does not accept him as a single man. I feel so bad for Tim that his personal life has become the talk of some group of people that he has never injured or interacted with. And I feel bad for Ian and Abigail that they had to field this as friends. I think they did the best that they could. I think in this situation, if I was Larry, my first step would be to talk to the church hierarchy beyond my actual local church. So for me, as United Methodists, I would go straight to my DS, talk to her or him, and seek to explain my side of things before the SPRC gets to them, and then go into the SPRC meeting seeking to understand. This week we're talking about the Holy Spirit, and sometimes faith in the Holy Spirit looks like walking into a space where you don't feel welcome, and relying on the work of the Holy Spirit to be present in that space, which I know sounds like a cop-out, but this SPRC is clearly giving voice to fear, and the best thing that we can do as pastors is to listen to the source of that fear, not necessarily to entertain or honor fear, but to provide pastoral care through that fear. If no understanding could be sought, I would pray for reappointment to another congregation, and I would also, in the meantime, ask the SPRC for some clear guidelines on who I could associate with and who I could not associate with, not because they have the authority to do so, but because I would never want to subject any other friends of mine to such horrendous experience, such as being called before the SPRC. I would avoid talking about Tim's sexuality, push back on them, letting them know that they could get to know Tim if they would like to know his sexuality, but that's a personal matter. And then maybe also just reflecting on the Book of Discipline if my sexuality was questioned as well, thereby not explaining who I am or who I love, or hopefully not betraying my beliefs, but rather pointing to the system through which I'm ordained in. Like I said, I really kind of wish that I hadn't even seen the case study, because this is just so difficult. But I hope some of my thoughts and understandings of the Holy Spirit and this case study have helped you this week. Thanks.